In this episode of Derp I fixed a couple issues with the wyrm portal and the black hole. Then I refactored the bumper and boss spawners to use signals instead of the connector auto load script. The first problem is if you defeat the black hole and then teleport before it's done exploding, it will get stuck when you return and continuously drop items indefinitely. This is because the tween node is automatically stopped when it exits the scene. To restart it, I'll connect to the tween's tree entered signal in the black hole script and call resume all to restart the interpolation. So now the black hole continues its close animation after using the portal. Next, you may have noticed, when a portal spawns on the player, it immediately teleports you to the new dimension before sending you back to the first. To fix this, I'll make the portal wait until it's done opening before it activates. I already have a cooldown timer in the player wormhole scene, which sets the disabled flag to true and disables the teleportation for a couple seconds. This prevents you from getting stuck in a teleportation loop. So I'll disable it by default. Then, when the open animation is done playing, set disabled to false. And I'll reduce the collision shape size so you have to fly further into the portal for it to take effect. So now it won't teleport you until you fly out and back into the range after it's done opening. Next, I'll be refactoring the bumper and object spawning. Currently, I'm using a custom auto-load script called connector to handle this. While I prefer direct function calls for auto-completion and they throw an error instead of failing silently, it makes it difficult to test individual features without adding them to the main scene. So I'll be reverting back to signals instead. So I'll copy out all of these spawner functions, and now I can get rid of the setup dimension and dimension layer variables as well. Then I'll open the dimension base scene and attach a new script, paste the functions, and I'll rename them to start with spawn for consistency, and change the variables to reference the nodes. Like so. I use the bumper list to count the total number of bumpers and stop spawning when it reaches the maximum cap. The projectiles, pickups, and explosions are just used for render order, which I could do with the Z index, but this makes it much easier to add a new layer in the middle if needed. So in the spawn bumper function, I'll connect to the bumper's spawn signals to their appropriate functions before adding it to the bumper list. Now in the bumper spawner class, I'll add a spawn bumper signal and emit this instead of using the connector to spawn the bumper. Then I'll connect to the bumper list spawn bumper signal, to the dimension spawn bumper function, to connect it all back. Then I'll add the spawn bumper, explosion, projectile, and item signals to the bumper ship base class as well. And replace the connector calls with emit signals. I've also disabled the boss spawner, so now I can run the project and use the errors to find the remaining connector calls. So I need to add the spawn bumper signal to the biodome colony as well, and emit this signal for the tube and the dome. And get rid of the connector. So I'll just keep running the project like this until it stops throwing errors. The rest of the nodes extend the bumper ship base class, so they already have access to all the signals. Now the game actually starts up, but it crashes when you start breaking bumpers. I'll make the tube use the spawn explosion signal and try again. So I need to fix the asteroid spawn chunk and item as well. So now everything seems to be working as intended. Next, I'll load the Olympus dimension from the main scene and fix the cloud's lightning bolt projectile. So now that works as well. And finally, I'll load the oceanus dimension to fix the naval mine and shark explosions. Now that the bumpers are all working, I'll refactor the boss spawner as well. So I'll remove the boss spawner node from the derp space dimension and add it directly to the base dimension scene instead. Then in the dimension script, I'll add a function to spawn the boss. Here I'll connect to the spawn boss, spawn item, and spawn boss core functions. and I can connect to additional signals later if needed. And I'll spawn it as a child of the boss layer node. Then I'll add the spawn boss signal in the boss spawner script and emit this signal in the spawn boss function. And I'll connect the signal back to the spawn boss function in the dimension script. Now I'll make a new class for the boss base script, extending rigid body 2D. Set the class name to boss, then add the spawn boss core, and spawn item signals. It turns out I need the spawn explosion and boss defeated signals as well, so I'll add these to the boss and dimension scripts as well. And the boss defeated signal connects to the boss node function here. Then I'll make the space wyrm extend the boss class and use signals to drop the boss core at the head's global position. Also spawn the wormholes on the explosion layer. And the spawn wyrm fragment. So we'll get rid of the call to get parent. Spawn the top half. And finally, I'll emit the boss defeated signal as well, so it can restart the boss timer. Now the space wyrm is a rigid body 2D and the black hole is an area 2D, so they can't inherit from the same base class. And I'll probably refactor both to use a generic 2D node as the root, but for now it'll be easier to just duplicate the boss class into a boss area, which extends area 2D, named boss area. Now I'll make the black hole extend the boss area class and emit the spawn boss core at global position, spawn item, boss defeated signals. Finally, I'll add the space wyrm and black hole back to the derp space boss list. And check if the boss list is empty. Is not empty before spawning the boss, so it doesn't throw an error in the other two dimensions. Now everything is working as it was before, which means my refactor was successful. That's all for this episode of Derp Star. Thank you for watching and have a great day.